Just a heads up, this episode does contain graphic descriptions of violence, and though it's almost entirely made up, some listeners may still find it upsetting. So just take care of yourself.
You gotta be more conservative with your tortures, because if you shred the insides of the mouths of all your novices, then who do you have left to throw babies in a pit? Nobody. You gotta preserve your workforce.
Way back in the 1830s, a supposed memoir by a runaway nun became the second best-selling book in America, leaving a profound and dangerous impact on a nation already consumed by a moral panic about the new wave of Irish and German Catholic immigrants. The Awful Disclosures of Maria Monk was a true crime tale of the horrors Maria claimed to have suffered while living among debaucherous and murderous Catholic clergy in a convent-turned-torture chamber. The book proved to large swaths of the public what they already believed, that this new scourge of Catholic immigrants was as dangerous as prominent Protestants were claiming. But was it really a truthful account of Maria Monk's life, or was it all a hoax, a piece of propaganda meant to incite hatred of the original immigrant folk devils of American culture? In this two-part series, Sarah Marshall of You're Wrong About and You Are Good joins me to descend into the dungeons of this allegedly despicable convent to try to separate fact from fiction, to talk about the similarities between this book and other hoax memoirs, and to discuss the particular ways that anti-immigrant rhetoric has remained the same for 2 centuries. I'm your host, Chelsea Weber-Smith, and this is American Hysteria. Hello, dear listeners. Do we have a bizarre journey for you over the next couple episodes? I am here with dear Sarah Marshall of You're Wrong About, who I know all of you are always thrilled when I say that name. So hello, Sarah Marshall. Welcome to the show.
Hello, dear Chelsea Weber-Smith. Makes me feel like dear Evan Hansen himself.
That's what I always call you behind your back. So we are here to talk about one of Sarah and my favorite things in our, list of favorite things, and that would be another hoax memoir.
Heck yeah.
Sarah, what do you love about a hoax memoir?
I love everything about a hoax memoir. I love it when they cause a scandal. I love what they reveal about the things people like to pretend to be, or the things that readers like to pretend happened. I love thinking about like the fictions that seem more believable to us than the truth. Mm-hmm. And I just love a good, relatively low stakes scandal,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
These are they're not victimless crimes, because you can't appropriate someone's culture without causing real harm, but they're on the lighter side of crime.
And, maybe we will see that is untrue in this case, but I don't know. We'll have to decide as we go along. And I was especially excited to specifically talk to you about this, not only because we both love studying hoax memoirs, but also because I think there's a lot in common with this hoax memoir and some of the fake memoirs that came out in the, 80s and 90s, 70s, 80s, 90s during the Satanic Panic. So,
okay, nice.
I think I want to show that the recipe is kind of set, right? It's been this way for more than, or for going on 200 years now, because we are going back to the 1830s.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. So, all right.
Bring your antibiotics, for the love of God.
For the love of God. The way I have structured this is we're just going to dive into the memoir, and then we're going to explore in our second part sort of the real story of what actually happened, and then the context of why this hoax memoir mattered during this time period in American history.
I love it.
Sound good to you?
Yeah. And I feel like I just can't wait to go down this big, scary mountain made of garbage with you.
Yes, it's a great description for it. So, first of all, this memoir, which is called The Awful Disclosures of Maria Monk, or The Hidden Secrets of a Nun's Life in a Convent Exposed. I know. This book was the second best-selling book in the United States prior to the Civil War, just after Uncle Tom's Cabin.
And yet you never hear about it in, the AP exams.
No, certainly not.
Unless you do.
No.
It's not like I've had the chance to be taking them into adulthood, but maybe I should.
Were you an AP?
Just history.
Just history. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep. I did one AP English class my freshman year and was like, okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
Off to smoke weed.
There should be an AP class in that where you just talk about philosophical concepts in the woods.
Yeah, it's like I learned more from that than I ever learned in the classroom. The other small amount of context I want to give that we will get into in depth later is that this is happening kind of in the middle of this massive immigration of Irish and German Catholic immigrants. So the context is that there is a kind of anti-Catholic hysteria happening in America, and it kind of laid this perfect groundwork for this memoir to become as popular as it was. Okay.
This was one of the things I consistently remember from my 11th grade AP class, that there was a lot of really over the top anti-Catholic propaganda. And I don't remember the class talking about this, but what I do remember is propaganda, I think from about this time, or, some time of similar xenophobic fear-mongering about nuns murdering babies as soon as they were born so that they could go to heaven, and that just being naturally what nuns did, doctrinally. And I was like, wow, that's really gross and gory. It's so cool that we were writing that in history times, just like today. Really made me understand the history people better.
Well, and let's just say, spoiler alert, Sarah Marshall.
Oh, boy.
All right.
Always with the dead babies.
Always, it's a universal language, I guess. So this book was published in January of 1836, and it was announced several months before it actually came out in this really popular newspaper called The American Protestant Vindicator.
Wow.
And it was really anticipated, right? I would compare it to a Netflix true crime documentary that everyone's seen the trailer of and is just waiting for it to come out.
Okay. Yeah. It's like the staircase.
It's like the staircase. And here's what I picture. Okay. It's fade in from black.
But
a young woman is adjusting herself in her chair, looking down, and then looks up, blinking into the camera.
Hot, but doesn't know it, says the script.
Yes. And then looks up directly into the camera and says, "I'm Maria Monk, and I had to escape the Black Nunnery."
And then it plays a Bon Iver song over the opening credits.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So basically, the long and short of it is that this book details really outrageous abuses and murders that Maria Monk said that she experienced and even helped commit at the Canadian Hotel Dieu. Everybody loves when I speak French on this show. Hotel Dieu.
I do love it.
Convent in Montreal. And that is what she called the Black Nunnery, which is a much cooler name for a sinister location.
It's a little bit like Twin Peaks, where Americans are very excited to read about Canadians engaging in sex trafficking.
Yes, they are. It's our own one-eyed jacks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to just frickin' dive in here. And I think maybe it's good to say up top that in kind of debunking this book, we're not claiming that abuses don't happen or didn't happen within the Catholic Church. I mean, I think that goes without saying.
Well, yeah, you know what I think is consistently interesting is that Catholicism now sort of, I don't know. I think maybe sort of because of the groundwork that you're talking about relatively easily took on the mantle of like a religious denomination that everyone was allowed to joke about being scary because they are. But you know what else is scary? Like most other sects of Christianity.
Very much.
That also contain abuses and also have very rigid top-down hierarchies, which create moist areas for abuses to grow. So, it's it's just the problem is when sort of fear of one thing stands in for the healthy fear we should have of the things that are much closer to home, which is a big satanic panic theme, of course.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And, it's also like what you're talking about in Protestant sects of all kinds, like across the board, it is very much an even rate of abuse. We've just kind of decided that the Catholic Church is, through publicity.
But we're like, well, but Catholics have incense, so
Yeah, and they smell like rose water.
We're very afraid of incense, in America.
Yeah, we are scared of incense.
We're like, well, at least we don't swing around incense. We just beat our children to death like good Protestants.
Yeah, exactly.
Without ever lighting a single candle, so it's fine.
Yep, we just make beige churches across the land.
It's also like in satanic panic literature, of course, classically, it's typically like, well, the Black Mass is the opposite of the Latin Mass, which like both sort of valorizes Catholicism as the anti-satanic thing, but also kind of puts it as adjacent to Satanism as we imagine it. Because I don't think I've ever heard anyone claim that Satanists all get together to play acoustic guitar.
No, definitely not. It is always like a very ritualistic, Catholic informed type of ritual, like you're saying. I think that's definitely true. And
I think cool ambiance and a little bit of chanting.
Yeah. Which is, again, just like a regular mass. So it does, all these things are very intrinsically connected. I think about even our Jack Chick series we did about that cartoonist who made those tracts that were full of both propaganda about the satanic panic, as well as like wild anti-Catholic propaganda that is right in line with what we're talking about today. So, this stuff continues to be alive in different ways. And I think we're just going to hear a lot of familiar stuff. We're going to hear a lot of familiar ideas about immigrants as well as we go along. And I think it's going to be important to just remember that the stories we tell about immigrants are very similar, no matter who those immigrants are, whether they're Irish Catholic or, the folks that we're seeing harmed today. So I think it's also, it has value in understanding the history of our immigration panics as well. So,
yeah, and hopefully just to see like how the pattern has played out so consistently is to make it something that feels more predictable, rather than like an absolutely fresh horror.
Yes.
Because, to predict maybe sometimes is to anticipate, and then you can undermine something better.
Exactly.
And that's why you should all study history, kids. But you don't have to take AP history. It really doesn't matter.
No.
You know where you can get college credits? In college.
And you can listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
Maybe. Sometimes. All right. So here we go. We enter the book. We enter the...
Oh, it's like Miss.
Awful Disclosures of Maria Monk, or The Hidden Secrets of a Nun's Life in a Convent Exposed. All right. So first, Maria talks about her childhood growing up in Canada. And her father was a Protestant who lightly read the Bible, but he died when she was young. And then the mom's not very religious, but she didn't have any issues with Catholics. So once in a while, they attended their churches. Okay.
Oh, no.
So
don't be not very religious, and don't be not too picky about what services you go to.
You're already catching on, babe. So
I love to be moralized too.
So she immediately starts to complain about her mother, typical. And a quote from the book says, "To my want of religious instruction at home and my ignorance of God and my duty, I can trace my introduction to convents and the scenes I am now to describe. If I had known anything of true religion, I believe I should never have thought of becoming a nun."
But I can't imagine people were worried about the number of young women becoming nuns at this point in time. It's a more broad attack. But what a great sentence.
No, they were.
Okay, all right.
They were. Yeah, no, people were very worried about young.
Because I guess like claiming that you're afraid of falling birth rates has always been a dog whistle for being racist.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot in there because if we think of what the nun represents, the nun represents a woman who is refusing her duty as a wife and mother. So they really did not like that, actually. And they were afraid of...
She's making lesbian, if you will.
Yes, yeah. And they were afraid of Protestants being influenced by Catholics and, turning their backs on the patriarchy.
Well, I mean, look, don't you think that nunhood is a little bit like being a ballerina, where it's like both a very feminine thing that's also kind of not very feminine according to the typical rules of it, where it's like you aggressively are not having babies, you know?
Yes. We're going to one day get a really good HOAX memoir about like an escaped ballerina. I would be so ready for that.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Oof. Scary. Okay. So I think it's interesting because she's already showing like what this book is for, right? Like immediately there's like the thesis of,
if only I hadn't been roped into the glamorous world of nuns. It's like Go Ask Alice, I guess, really.
It is. Yeah. Man. It's absolutely. Yeah. It's totally like that. So when Maria's young, she gets enrolled at a local school run by nuns, because a lot of times nuns were running schools for, lower income people, immigrants.
Yeah, a lot of convent schools at that time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, a lot of convent schools. Yeah.
My dad was taught by nuns growing up, which was not in the 1830s, but, not terribly farther away from then than from today.
My mom's got some bad nun stories from her Catholic school days. And she thinks that her knee problems might have been from how often they forced her to pray on the hard floor. So,
I believe it.
Yeah.
You know what is nice about Episcopalianism? Nice cushy kneelers. You're going to get down on your knees, but you're going to do it in comfort and style.
Okay, so she's enrolled at this school that's run by nuns, and it kind of inspires her eventually to join the convent at Hotel Dieu, and she becomes a novice, which is what you are when you're kind of proving yourself as a young nun before you take the veil. And right off the bat, the nuns are mean, right? They're like very cliche in just being super strict, really harsh, very demanding and cruel, and also totally dedicated to the word of the priests. Like they treat priests like they can do no wrong, and they are, the stand-in for God. So right off the bat, the vibes are weird. It's like pretty ominous. And she starts to realize that there's something really off about the priests and the bishop. And she starts to just sense that they have this like lecherous quality to them. And then during her first confession after becoming a novice, this is what happens. Okay, this is another quote. I recollect how the priests used to recline their heads on one side and often cover their faces with their handkerchiefs, while they heard me confess my sins and put questions to me, which were often of the most improper and revolting nature, naming crimes both unthought of and inhuman. Still, strange as it may seem, I was persuaded to believe that all of this was their duty, or that it was done without sin.
It's these parts are fairly believable so far. So sure. I'm glad we're starting off slow. It's not like Go Ask Alice where you give someone a bunch of acid first and then work them up to pot.
Then see what the hell happens. More after this. And now back to the show. As we'll kind of see, because it was the 1830s, a lot of what's going to be in here around any sexual crimes is like very implied.
Right.
And she's going to say a lot of like, no good Christian could speak this aloud type of thing. So, we'll be making some assumptions as we go along here.
Okay.
So eventually she starts to see that any kind of mistake or indiscretion or, sin is going to lead to penances, which are the actions, often punishments that make up for those sins.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be something as small as being forced to kneel on dried peas when getting the answer wrong in class, which I'd never heard of, but sounds very painful.
Yeah, I think I've heard of, just in kind of various forms of religious abuse, kids being forced to kneel on or walk on various like little hard things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've heard of like kneeling on grits, but I don't know. Is that like a Dorothy Allison book, or is that an actual thing I read about happening, Yeah, well, there's a thin line. Yeah, who knows?
Kneeling on grits.
Or is it an Indigo Girls song? No.
She starts to see that the penances are often worse than kneeling on dried peas. Here's another quote. Punishments were sometimes resorted to while I was a novice, though but seldom. The first time I ever saw a gag was one day when a young novice had done something to offend the superior. The superior sent for a gag, after which she put it into her mouth, so far as to keep it open, and then let it remain some time before she took it out. There was a leather strap fashioned to each end and buckled to the back of the head.
I don't like that.
No, it's very like, did you ever go to the wax museum when you were a kid and they had the torture chamber?
Oh, yeah. Every kid's favorite. Well, some kids' favorite.
Yeah, it was my favorite. Absolutely. Although I have since learned that many medieval torture devices were hoaxes. So I'm going to bring that to you again someday.
There's an episode of You're Wrong about that.
You already covered it.
Yeah, with Dana Schwartz, but
amazing. Of course, with Dana.
But yeah, I mean, and in a nutshell, it's basically that, people in historical periods like to assume that people in past historical periods were really stupid or really evil. So I think the Iron Maiden is like a Victorian invention to make themselves feel better about the Middle Agers, the same way that we now make fun of Victorians for being dysfunctional about sex because we're normal.
We're totally doing fine. So after seeing this stuff, she begins to get a little more disillusioned.
Fair enough.
And then eventually she just kind of gets pissed off at this nun who's being a real bee. And then Irish exits the convent and just doesn't tell anybody.
Appropriately.
Yep. And then there's just this like short section where she gets married really hastily to this guy who's got a terrible reputation, but she's like, no, I can fix him. And then it turns out he is bad. So she goes back to the nunnery and keeps the marriage a secret, because if she were to admit that she had left her husband or gotten married at all, she wouldn't be able to be.
Is the marriage consummated?
She doesn't say, but I'm going to guess that it was. Yeah. So she's back and she is keeping this secret about this marriage because she's, afraid of what they would think, what they would do. And she also is just completely unnerved all the time now because she has this secret and can't confess it. So if she dies, she thinks she'll shoot straight to hell.
Yeah. And she knows these nuns are pretty judgy while she's alive, too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So then she, powers through, kind of forgets her fear about it, and is ready to take the veil and become an official nun.
Wow.
So what she has to do, which is all honestly, just there's so much kinky stuff in Catholicism, right?
Yeah, there really is. Well, because again, to my understanding, it's the Protestant crucifix generally is it's the shape of it. And then you look at it and you remember that there was a crucifixion at one point and you're like, yeah, that happened. But the Catholic crucifix is no, you want to see Jesus writhing around, right? Why wouldn't you? Here he is.
Yeah.
Boy, he's in pain.
Come on.
And there is just such a kinkiness to sainthood you know?
Oh, yeah.
Like, isn't Saint Sebastian kind of like a patron saint of masochism?
That seems right. I know Saint Francis was like always like, step on my face because I'm such a little worm, like to like humble me, you know? So
that's why birds brought him food.
Yeah, exactly.
They do that for all subs.
For all their little worms. So she has to, you know, throw herself at the feet of the priest and the superior and take the wafers while she's on all fours. And then less kinky, they just put her in her own coffin, like the coffin she will one day be buried in. And she just has to like lay there for a while. And then she's a nun. Ta-da.
Oh, well, that was pretty easy, actually. I was expecting there to be more of a test. All right.
Nope. She kind of, the test is just kind of like all the, you know, months and years leading up to this ceremony.
Good for her.
Yeah, go for her. So she then is kind of immediately introduced to the real underbelly of this nunnery.
Oh no, it's like Scientology.
Yeah, it's exactly like Scientology. So here's another quote from Maria. I was now to have access to every part of the edifice, even to the cellar, where 2 of the sisters were imprisoned for causes which she did not mention, the Mother Superior.
Mail fraud.
Yeah. I must be informed that one of my great duties was to obey the priests in all things, and this I soon learnt to my astonishment and horror was to live in the practice of criminal intercourse with them.
And she said great duties, so
yeah,
it's pretty fun.
Yeah. The priests, she said, were not situated like other men, being forbidden to marry, while they lived secluded, laborious, and self-denying lives for our salvation. They might indeed be considered our saviors, as without their service we could not obtain pardon of sin and must go to hell. So, you know, we have the next kind of chapter. We go from the priest being creepy and saying creepy stuff during confession to full on demanding that this new nun have sex with them, you know, at their will.
Yeah.
So,
which again, like, yeah, I don't doubt that there historically has been plenty of sexual abuse of nuns by priests.
Yeah, of course.
The coffin sleeping, though, is more of a fun touch, though, I would think.
Yeah. And I think with these kinds of memoirs, I think what we're looking for is that kind of atrocity propaganda feel where like these things are actually all somewhat plausible. You know, you can imagine this happening. It doesn't really take a leap of the imagination to say nuns have probably been abused by priests, but you know, it might take a longer jump to get to some of the more sensational content that this book has, right?
Yeah. Well, and I always struggle to articulate this, but I feel like the feel that you're talking about to me is partly when somebody is carrying out abuses that are like extremely laborious to them for no reason, except that it'll sound really hardcore to someone who hears about it later, which I think, I don't know, to me, part of the awfulness of any abusive situation is how little the person doing it is really thinking about your experience at all, even to the point of being like, this will be really impressively complexly bad, as you know, and like keeping you in a cage full of snakes, and then like, how are they getting all the snakes? How do you keep the snakes in the cage? Don't they just slither in and out freely, you know, as opposed to just, you know, you don't have to do anything very complicated to really break a human will, unfortunately, it would seem.
Yes. And the sense that, you know, perhaps we could have one extremely sensational villain in a story, but when we start to have this kind of secret society,
right, when everyone is that level of villainy,
they all have this like cackling evil about them, you start to say, I don't think that's as plausible. So the Mother Superior talks to Maria, because I think she's like, well, you've now experienced what we've all had to experience, and she admits that she felt a lot of horror when she found out what they had to do as part of taking the veil. And she said most nuns, all nuns, feel this horror, but that it really was fine because priests literally can't sin and that she'd get used to it. You know, all the things you would think that someone who was aiding and abetting an abuser would say, right?
And she's like, Maria, how do we solve a problem like you?
Yeah, yes. And then we get our Catholic blood libel, which you spoke about a little bit ago. Here's a quote of what Maria thusly hears.
Is she going to go crack some baby skulls?
Eventually. So, infants were sometimes born in the convent, but they were always baptized and immediately strangled. This secured their everlasting happiness, for the baptism purifies them from all sinfulness. And being sent out of the world before they had time to do anything wrong, they were at once admitted to heaven. How happy, she exclaimed, are those who secure immortal happiness to such little beings. Their little souls would thank those who kill their bodies if they had it in their power. So that's what the Mother Superior is saying.
This is what I read in my APUSH textbook. Wow.
Yeah, it's all coming back to you now.
Exactly. There were moments of gold and there were flashes of light. Yeah. There were things we'd never do again, but then it always seemed right. There were nights of endless pleasure. It was more than any laws allow, to get back to our subject matter.
Yeah, and that's not the song Maria was singing at this convent.
Nah.
So she hears this, and there's a lot of her talking about her own cognitive dissonance and how she kind of just pushes all of this down and keeps telling herself that it's all above board and it's all part of, what God wants and what the priests want, which basically is what God wants, right?
Allegedly, yeah.
Allegedly, yes. And the priests often talk about this difference that exists between a wicked lie and a religious lie. So a wicked lie is one done to injure in some way, and a religious lie is done to protect the church. So that's, the whole thing was that the Mother Superior would lie to visitors and make things seem okay and make it not seem like there was this factory of torture happening at this convent. And all of the nuns were required to just kind of back her up and agree with the things that she said and nod their heads and look like good nuns.
All right. So religious lying is okay as long as you're protecting the Chamber of Horrors from outsiders' prying eyes. All right. Got it.
Exactly. But amidst all this terrible stuff, we've got a light. Okay. And her name is Jane Ray. And she's this absolutely kooky, wacky nun. And she's known as Mad Jane. And she's a little bit nuts, but really fun. And everybody likes her. And she's kind of the Puck of our story here.
From A Midsummer Night's Dream, not the real world.
No, not
okay,
the real world.
Great.
She was kind of like the prankster of the nunnery. And yeah, she was often pulling fast ones on fellow nuns and, the higher nuns.
Okay, good. I didn't think there were going to be pranks in this book. At least there's something. What kind of pranks are we talking here?
Here's a quote from Maria. Sometimes she would pass behind us as we stood at dinner ready to sit down, and softly moving back our chairs, leave us to fall down upon the floor. And while we were laughing together, she would spring forward, kneel to the superior, and beg her pardon and a penance.
Wow, that's more wackiness than I would have expected.
It's so classic. Pull the chair out. I mean, it's timeless.
At least since chairs have been around.
Yep, at least since then. I don't know, when were chairs invented? Middle Ages? No way. Romans had chairs. What am I saying?
Yeah. We'll get into it later. Yeah.
We'll have to get into that on another episode. Yeah. So another prank she pulled is she would move the boards beneath the beds, quote, so that night nearly a dozen nuns fell down upon the floor while getting into bed, which is... Again, classic comedy.
How is she not murdered based on the level of torture going on at this place,
Well, we'll see.
Oh, boy.
Uh-huh.
Poor Jane Ray.
So another night, Jane Ray dressed a broomstick in a white cloth and lifted it up before the Mother Superior's chamber windows. And the Mother Superior and all the nuns who were around believed in ghosts. So they all started screaming and freaking out because this, haphazard puppet was peeking in their window. Another classic prank. I love it.
Nothing like a prank puppet.
I know. So I think Jane Ray appears as kind of like this one respite that Maria had in the convent, and they would like whisper together at night and like lay in bed together, and Maria would sometimes like help her with her schemes. Like sometimes she'd be a little bad and get in on the pranks.
Does Maria like have a personality, or is she just kind of like generic narrator type person in this?
A generic narrator. Yeah.
That's too bad.
I know. She's pretty boring. She's the stand-in for the audience who has to picture themselves at the Black Nunnery.
In case the audience is boring. Yeah.
Yes. So, here's the last like little funny Jane Ray thing I have. Just kind of showing a little bit of the side of the nuns that have like personhood. So this one French Canadian nun who showed up and didn't speak English well, accidentally said that she was performing a duty for the god. And everyone thought it was like the fucking funniest thing that they'd ever heard, that someone would say that she was doing something for the god.
Guess they don't hear many jokes.
No, they don't. They don't. Mad Jane Ray especially like thought this was so funny and would say it all the time. And they all started to say it like if they had to go lie for the Mother Superior about some dark truth, they'd be like to each other behind the nun's back, like, remember you're doing it for the god. They'd all have to not laugh,
I like that.
I like it too. It reminds me of this tweet that I wanted to share, actually. I've seen it going around a lot lately, and it's probably one of my favorites of all time. It's from @Merman5, and it's okay, like parentheses, me telling my story how I survived a plane crash and lived on a deserted island for a year. It was crazy. Friend who got a text from me where I accidentally called the Grinch the Grink. Was the Grink there? They're one of my favorites.
Oh my God. There is something about the word Grink that's just like comedy gold.
I know. Was the Grink there?
See, I don't want to read tweets. I want them to be told to me by people I know, just delivered to me by eyedropper.
Yeah, it's more socially responsible.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to get into now some of Maria's treatment in the clutches of the priests. And she, again, like refuses to say anything that might offend the sensitive ears of the religious. So again, a lot of implication, but still a little upsetting. So here we go. She says, some were gross and degraded in a way which few of my readers can ever have imagined, and I should be willing to offend the eye and corrupt the ear of anyone by an account of their words and actions. Few imaginations can conceive deeds so abominable as they practiced, and often required of some of the poor women under the fear of severe punishments and even death.
It's a lot of buildup. It better be bad.
Yeah. And then she says that Father called me out saying he wished to speak with me. I feared what was his intention, but I dared not disobey. In a private apartment, he treated me in a brutal manner. And from 2 other priests, I afterwards received similar usage that evening. The father afterwards appeared again, and I was compelled to remain in company with him until the morning.
That does a good job at being a pretty harrowing description without getting into details, to be honest.
She does a good job of it, absolutely. And I think that it is also this thing like in horror movies where they don't show you the killer or the monster or whatever, because what you can imagine is usually going to be worse than what is put forward to the audience.
Totally.
So it's an effective tool to allow things to be even worse than maybe you.
Yeah, than you're able to depict.
Yes. So this is creepy. After this happens, Maria learns that she has to admit the priests into the convent at odd hours in the middle of the night, presumably to like allow them access to the nuns. And what would happen is that whoever was keeping watch in the evening the priest would come to the door and like through the crack in the door would go, like a scary hissing noise.
Like a little Hannibal Lecter type deal?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, like a... I can't do that very well.
No,
Can you do
that was
it?
good.
That was really good. Yeah. So yeah, you just get like a through the door.
Ugh.
And then the nuns would have to basically go, and then let them in.
Oh my
That's
God.
the story. Yeah.
Also, there's no one else there. They're not hiding from anybody. They could just knock. Whatever.
I know. That's what I was thinking.
It's being creeps on purpose.
Part of it is that this convent, and we'll get into this, is also a place where they're taking care of sick people. So it's one of the only hospitals in the region. So part of the sneakiness is that there are people around that are not in on all of these dark secrets, right?
Okay. Yeah. So of course you got to hiss under those circumstances.
You've got to hiss. More after this. And now, back to the show. Now it really starts to get a horror movie vibe. And Maria is asked to go get coal from the cellar area. Right, of course.
Yeah, never the cellar. Even the turtle couldn't help her.
What is that from?
That's it.
Oh my God, the book.
Oh, yeah, I guess it's not in the, well, I haven't seen the newer movies, but yeah.
Oh, who cares? Yeah. No.
Nice.
We're 1990 purists here.
That's
as we
true.
often talk about. But anyway, great reference. Okay, so
Thank you.
she's going down into the cellar, the basement, whatever you would like to call it. She has her lantern. She walks down the stairs, and then, the ground is bare earth, and it starts to take on a barbarian vibe.
For the barbarian fans out there.
Yeah. If you haven't seen Barbarian and you like horror movies, stop this episode now and go watch it.
And then come back. You'll be in the perfect mood, I'm sure, for the rest of the episode.
Oh, you will. Yes. But what I mean by that is like dark tunnel vibes, right?
Big, scary basement.
Yeah. Under the seemingly normal Airbnb that is the nunnery. So she's passing through this really dark, damp corridor, and she sees 6 doors with huge iron bolts on them. And then she keeps going, and she passes through another hall with these smaller compartments that all have big locks on them. And then she walks past bolted doors.
It's also sounding a little bit like the Pirates of the Caribbean, at least.
Ooh, yeah. We can dream.
And then there's a little dog holding keys.
And there's a woman chasing a man with a broom in a circle forever.
Because they revised it from a man chasing a woman because they realized that they shouldn't do that. So now it's even.
And that is what we call wokeism. So as she's passing through these creepy places, she starts to notice that the dirt on the floor is mixed with this white substance. Any guess of what this white substance could be?
Cocaine.
Okay, not cocaine.
I know. Okay. Asbestos?
No, that's okay.
Was that it? No, that's okay. Wait, I want one last
You
guess.
want one more guess? Okay.
Manna from heaven. Okay.
Great guesses. We'll get back to the white substance in a minute. What she stumbles upon next is an enormous hole that's like 12 feet wide, and she says that it seems to have no bottom. And she realizes that all the white stuff on the ground is lime.
See,
Do you know what people use lime for?
I do, because I read American Psycho at an impressionable age. You use it to dissolve corpses.
That's right. And to hide the smell of decomposition.
This is very Ready or Not. Yes, there's the part in Goodfellas where they have to I think Joe Pesci impulsively kills somebody and Robert De Niro is like, I got no fucking lime. It's like, of all nights.
Well, these nuns had a lot of fucking lime. So. and Maria just immediately knows intrinsically in her soul that this is where all the babies get thrown into after they're killed by the priests who have impregnated the nuns.
That's a shame.
And then the babies go to heaven, according to them, right?
It is like, I mean, this is probably spelling out the obvious, but I feel like the obvious utility of blood libel is to say, like, you know, you can very, very quickly and effectively dehumanize a group of people by saying, see, they don't even care for their young.
Yeah. I mean, it's the perfect accusation, I think, because it's like taking the most innocent creature that exists. And like, if you can do that to, you know, God's most innocent, then what can you do to a normal person? Okay. So she just kind of is like, well, nothing I can do about this. I'm just going to shove it down again.
She's like, well, that's a shame.
Yeah. And then she's just like, but their souls are in heaven, so maybe it's okay.
This is like a memoir of academia. You know, you just become gradually disillusioned by degrees.
Yes. Yes. Oh, bless you, academics. We're thinking of you every day.
Yeah, doing the good work under greater and greater pressure.
Yeah. So this is like where things ramp up to a level that is wild, okay?
I hope the devil is a character with dialogue at some point. That's what my hope for any book.
Well, I'm sorry to say the devil won't be making an appearance today.
Okay.
I know. I don't think the devil was like as talking back then. You know, like he wasn't as like chatty.
Well, he won't shut up these days.
I know.
You know what's crazy too? I was watching Bedazzled, you know, where Elizabeth Hurley is the devil and she's going to help Brendan Fraser get the girl of his dreams.
Yes.
Why can't he just date the devil who's Elizabeth Hurley, or at least chooses to appear as Elizabeth Hurley? He's just he can marry the devil and just be done with it. That's what, you know, that's what I do.
And have awesome powers. Yeah. Seems obvious.
Yeah. Or I think the devil would really want just a nice, like, mimbo husband, you know, who just like hangs out around the house and makes her hot sandwiches.
That's definitely true. Yeah. So here we go. So if you're sensitive to kind of brutal stuff, folks, some's coming up. But remember, this is all fake. So one day, she and a group of other nuns are required to go and like seize this other nun. And she's just this like 20-year-old blonde girl. And they drag her up to the second story because she said that she would rather die than be a part of killing babies. Okay.
She was like, you guys, it's a figure of speech. I just meant I was tired this morning.
Yeah, it's just a phrase I use. So, all right, I'm going to read kind of a long section here, but we need it. Some of those who took part in this transaction, I believe, were as unwilling as myself, but others delighted in it. Their conduct exhibited a most bloodthirsty spirit, but above all human fiends I ever saw, Saint Hippolyte was the most diabolical. It's a nun. She seized a gag, forced it into the mouth of the poor nun, and when it was fixed between her extended jaws so as to keep them open at their greatest possible distance, she took hold of the straps fastened at each end of the stick, crossed them behind the helpless head of the victim, and drew them tight through the loop prepared as a fastening. The bed, which had always stood in one part of the room, still remained there. On the bed, the prisoner was laid with her face upward and then bound with cords so that she could not move. In an instant, another bed was thrown upon her. One of the priests, named Bonin, sprung like a fury first upon it with all his force. He was speedily followed by the nuns until there were as many upon the bed as could find room, and all did what they could, not only to smother but to bruise her. Some stood up and jumped upon the poor girl with their feet, some with their knees, and others in different ways, seemed to seek how they might best beat the breath out of her body and mangle it without coming in direct contact with it or seeing the effects of their violence. During this time, my feelings were almost too strong to be endured. I felt stupefied and scarcely conscious of what I did. Yeah. So basically they're mashing this nun between two beds, right? Like it's very extreme.
It's like a very violent version of soaking.
Yes. Or what is it soaking when the bouncing happens? Or is it called something else?
Yeah, I think that's what soaking is.
Yeah. Yes.
According to legend.
According to Mormon legend. Mormon Legend would be a good like urban legend podcast name.
Yeah.
Because they got a lot of good ones.
Well, and again, it's like, it's horrible, but also you're like, this seems like a bit too elaborate, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and it says, like once they ceased to trample upon her, all was motionless and silent beneath it. They then began to laugh at such inhuman thoughts as occurred to some of them, rallying each other in the most unfeeling manner and ridiculing me for feelings which I in vain endeavored to conceal. So it's like, again, this cackling evil, which is like the term that always comes to mind for me, which is really scary because it means that someone has pretty much lost any ability to empathize with another human being if they're like laughing at this, extreme pain. So it's very scary and effective, but also not really common when it comes to the abuses that people actually suffer in the world, right?
Yeah. And also I think this is maybe like weirdly prescient in describing cult dynamics. And I think the reality perhaps in situations like this is that there are often people quietly resistant to what's going on or to taking part in it, but not knowing how to communicate with each other because of the overwhelming social pressure.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So after this, the book says that the body was taken by the nuns and dragged down into the cellar and thrown into the hole, which I have already described, and covered with a great quantity of lime. It's
convenient for the plot that she found the hole right before the story.
Isn't it? So yeah, talk about atrocity propaganda. I think that's like a really sensational way to kill a nun who was just like, no, I won't hurt a hair on that baby's head that's going to get thrown into the lime pit. It's like,
yeah, they didn't draw and quarter her, but yeah, it was pretty bad.
So again, what does she do? She shoves it all down. She just says, okay, well, nothing I could do there. But again, it's this example of this complicity in a murder or some sort of, dramatic abuse that these fake memoirs often have, right? Where you're like, you are either a murderer or, part of a murder in some way. And then because you're like telling the story and admitting it, it like somehow absolves you, right? Because the book she's not like, oh my God, I'm so sorry I did this. Like, please don't take me to jail.
Right.
When I'm talking about how I helped murder this nun. It's just a interesting part about these like runaway memoirs, right? We see it with like Mike Warnke's The Satan Cellar, where he's like part of all these ritual murders, but that's never like a problem, right? It's just like, well, I'm here to tell you about it and I've changed, so it's fine.
Right. It's like it strengthens his testimony or something, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is very odd. And you're like, well, maybe the statute of limitations for ritual murder runs out really quickly. It's like 6 weeks or something. And after that, you get probation. Yeah.
In the 1830s. Yeah. It does. It makes me think of like that clip from the Oprah special on Satanism where, someone stands up in the audience and is like, I was a Satanist and I, stabbed this woman to death and blah, blah, blah. And Oprah's like, see? I don't know what she actually says, but it's very like, see, I told you it was real.
There's a lot of murderers walking around. What are you going to do? It's fine, though.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. So she eventually is asked yet again to go get coal and go into that cellar. And once she's down there, this time behind one of those locked doors is a nun. And she just kind of sees that and kind of freaks out and runs away. But then is like, I want to know what's going on with this nun. There are actually two.
Yeah, good question, Maria.
Yeah, it's a great question, right? And she asks around kind of in a whispered, hushed tone, like to people like Jane Ray about, what is actually happening down there? Why are they there? And basically, they're all telling her that they don't really know and they don't actually know their identities, but that nuns keep disappearing. And that every time a nun disappears, like the next day, there's a new nun, right? Which is great. It's like so horror movie, right? It's just like the new nun just walks in and they're like, welcome to the convent. Another great horror movie moment.
They're selling them for dog meat.
Yeah, exactly.
Taking them to the knackers.
But then Jane Ray offers like some more information where I'm kind of like, all these people really have held on to a lot of the worst stuff as they've become friends with each other. And Jane Ray says that before Maria got there, there were 3 nuns who were 2 sisters and a cousin who all killed themselves by basically slitting their wrists in bed. And then they too were thrown into the lime hole. And then the next day there were 3 new nuns.
What are they going to do when they fill this hole up, you know?
It's a good question. I guess the decomposition is supposed to be breaking all of it down.
They're being lazy. They're not thinking ahead. This is some priest's idea. You can tell. Yeah,
some lazy ass priest.
I guess they'll just dig a new hole. But I mean, anyway, it's the laziness that I'm most offended by.
Okay, so a few days after this, Maria, who's kind of in this constant state of like faltering denial, watches live as 3 different babies are given a baptism by a priest and then suffocated by a nun, and then watches as they're thrown into the pit. And she says that this happened like dozens of times while she lived there, and people were just kind of, casual about it. So yet again, we see her being kind of an accessory to these crimes, right?
It's kind of like a Disney movie, you know? It's a culture where everyone's the same and one girl's different. She's like, I want more than all this baby killing. I want a different life.
I want much more than this conventual life.
There you go. That's beautiful.
Thanks.
Just watch, I'm going to make Belle my wife.
Oh, I want a pun, but I'm not getting there. Okay, so then the penances start to get worse. So the punishments for the small transgressions are only becoming more sinister. So this is another quote. I had seen the gags repeatedly in use and sometimes applied with a roughness which seemed rather inhuman. But it is one thing to see and another thing to feel. These were kept in one of the community rooms, in a drawer between 2 closets, and there a stock of about 50 of them were always kept in deposit. The disobedient were soon overpowered, and to prevent their screams from being heard beyond the walls, gagging commenced immediately. I have seen a half dozen lying gagged and bound at once. My hands have been tied behind me and a gag put into my mouth, sometimes with such force and rudeness as to separate my lips and cause the blood to flow freely.
This is the second best-selling book in America before the Civil War, you said?
Yep.
My Lord, what's the first best-selling one? The Bible?
It was Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
It's a very interesting pairing.
It is a really interesting pairing. And yeah, so we're getting these images that are even more evocative of violence and things that are going to grab the attention of the Protestant public.
Well, and I mean, speaking of, like, I would say arguably evocative of slavery to some extent.
Yeah.
Like it's interesting to see, because I think you could argue that it's being sort of projected onto this idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's very much happening concurrently, and the Civil War wouldn't be for another 30 years. So other penances that they were forced to do was kissing the floor, kissing the feet of the superior, kneeling on hard peas, as we've discussed, or having peas put in the shoes, and they have to walk around all day, eating with a rope around the neck.
What's that for?
I'm not sure if it's like to like make it harder to swallow.
Ugh.
Would be maybe my guess. Yeah. They were forced to eat things that they hated the most. They were forced to drink the water that the Mother Superior had washed her feet in, which again, it's like a little kinky. And then here's a quote, kind of like to your snake cage thing. Eels were repeatedly given to some of us because we felt an unconquerable repugnance to them on account of reports we heard of their feeding on dead carcasses in the river of St. Lawrence. So it's like, were they just like handing people eels?
Maybe were they given eels to eat?
Maybe. I don't know. It's very unclear.
Yeah. Or were they just like, here, it's a pet for you, darling.
It's like, here, catch. It's like, oh, a slippery eel. I can't hold on to it.
Think fast.
Think fast. Reminds me of those things that used to get at like the fun science toy store that are like, you know, they'd like slip through your hands infinitely. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know.
You would. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, but well, do you mean the plastic things that are like kind of tubes that are filled with glitter?
Yeah,
and
and
stuff?
there's like goop in them. Yeah.
Yeah, those are great.
It's also giving like sharks in the kiddie pools of McMartin to me.
Yes.
The daycare.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of like, for anyone who doesn't recall, the McMartin preschool scandal was the extremely sensationalized trial in which, you know, children were coerced into saying that their teachers at the daycare had done all sorts of absolutely impossible, you know, horrors, like sacrifice a horse in the middle of the classroom. What do you remember?
Well, and they were talking about being flown around in airplanes a lot too.
Yeah, they were always flying around.
Yeah, and like and there was a big tunnel. You know, they were coercing children into coming up with allegations, and then once a child came up with something, they would pressure the other ones to agree.
Right.
And so one of the things that emerged from that was that there was supposed to be this big tunnel underneath McMartin, but there wasn't. So like, how quickly can adults be relied on to fill in a tunnel?
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
And again, it's like, if you're going to dig it, like, if you're digging a tunnel, there's a certain amount of infrastructure that people would have noticed. So yeah, it's when these stories get into the realm of like, but there are certain physical realities here that surely, you know, at least a district attorney could be relied on to think about. And
yes, actually what you're saying is pretty prescient to where our episode is going to head. So.
Oh boy.
Put a pin in that. So other things they had to do as part of penances were to brand themselves with hot irons and whip themselves with rods until they drew blood, and to wear belts around their waists and chests that were full of sharp points. And this one, which is just the most extreme thing I can think of, is to chew the glass from the windows into a fine powder while the Mother Superior watched.
No.
Come on.
You gotta be more conservative with your tortures, because if you shred the insides of the mouths of all your novices, then who do you have left to throw babies in a pit? Nobody. You gotta preserve your workforce.
It's true. Yeah, it's true. They're really just flying by the seat of their pants here.
They're not thinking it through.
And of course, like, when I tell you there is so much gagging, there's just gags. Yeah. And I don't mean jokes.
Well, no wonder this book sold so well.
Well, that's the thing, right?
Yeah. And I think the great American, like, what, you know, I mean, one of maybe the key things about American culture is that we're very scared of sex, but that means that there's this weird bestseller market for like something sexy, but only in the storytelling guise of sex being the worst thing that could possibly happen. And also this is instructive somehow.
Yes. So then she talks about this thing called the cap, which is a mysterious like thing, like a mysterious like kind of hat that is placed on a nun while her hands are bound behind her back and she's gagged. And this is what she said about it. I have never examined one of the caps nor saw the inside, for they are always brought and taken away quickly. But although the first sensation was that of coolness, it was hardly put on my head before a violent and indescribable sensation began, like that of a blister, only much more insupportable. And this continued until it was removed. It would produce such an acute pain as to throw us into convulsions, and I think no human being could endure it for an hour. After this punishment, we felt its effects through the system for many days. Having once known what it was by experience, I held the cap in dread, and whenever I was condemned to suffer the punishment again, I felt ready to do anything to avoid it. But when tied and gagged with the cap on my head again, I could only sink upon the floor and roll in anguish until it was taken off.
Man.
What do we think that is?
I don't know. Electrocution?
Maybe. Let's find out when that happened.
I think that in the late 18th century, people were playing around with electricity.
Electrocuted. I'm Googling, when did people start getting electrocuted?
Or just like some amount of electric shock, you know?
Yeah. Maybe. I think it's a good hypothesis. Either that or like it heats up somehow, but I don't know. It's just a really weird, mysterious thing.
Or they're playing Skibbity Toilet in there. I mean, the thing is, when you're making something up, you can also invent torture technologies, I think.
Yeah. And then again, it's this like, I'm not going to describe it or I don't know what it is. So you can't see the whole thing. So you get to imagine the worst thing.
Yeah. I'm not going to explain how it works. Yeah. Like the, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, where you're like, and suddenly I figured out how to make my monster. I'm not telling you, of course, but I did it.
Yeah.
And oh boy, I shouldn't have done it.
Yep. It's like really it's like a Rorschach test of like, what are you going to imagine this torture device is?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess I do just kind of automatically picture something similar to the head part of an electric chair.
Yeah. I think it's a good hypothesis. So something like that could happen for a transgression such as like washing your hands without permission. So it's this other thing where the punishment is so outsized as to really imply just like great evil, right? Like how could anybody believe or do these things?
Right.
So here's more. We were sometimes invited to put ourselves in voluntary suffering in a variety of ways, not for a penance, but to show our devotion to God. A priest would sometimes say to us, "Now, which of you have love enough for Jesus Christ to stick a pin through your cheeks?"
Yeah.
I know.
It's like those fringe work activities that aren't mandatory, but are going to be held against you if you don't go.
Yep, I know exactly what you're talking about. Some of us would signify our readiness and immediately thrust one through up to the head. Sometimes he would propose that we repeat the operation several times on the spot, and the cheeks of a number of nuns would be bloody. Do we think that's going on?
No, I really don't,
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And then it would get worse. Sometimes orders would actually come down from the Pope himself to torture these nuns in this random convent.
Oh, surely the Pope doesn't need to enforce things on that scale. That's just micromanaging.
I know. It's like, leave us alone. Friggin' states' rights. Okay, so orders would come down from the Pope, quote, to request that those nuns who possessed the greatest devotion and faith should be requested to perform some particular deeds, which she named or described in our presence, but of which no decent or moral person could ever endure to speak. I cannot speak what would injure any ear, not debased to the lowest possible degree. So again.
Oh, come on. Yeah. Answer the question, Claire.
Give up the goods, Maria. But, the conspiracy grows, right? It becomes like the top is involved, like all the way to the top. The thing is rotten. Which
again, conspiracy 101, you try to avoid the very top issuing traceable orders to the very bottom, right? You really aim for plausible deniability. But if you're inventing a conspiracy, you also get to have the conspirators be complete idiots, which is helpful.
Right. At some point after this, she's talking to this really old nun who's been at this convent for a really long time, and she tells her experience. "I have witnessed so many horrid scenes," said she, "in this convent, that I want somebody near me constantly and must always have a light burning in my room. I cannot tell you," she added, "what things I remember, for they would frighten you too much. What you have seen are nothing to them. Many a murder have I witnessed. Many a nice young creature has been killed in this nunnery. I advise you to be very cautious. Keep everything to yourself. There are many here ready to betray you."
Once you've thrown babies in a pit, you can't really go much more extreme than that, I gotta say.
But yes, I guess Maria Monk would like you to believe that there are things worse.
It's like, well, then be creative and think of something. Come on.
I know. But she's following the monster problem and not showing us the full thing, so we can imagine it for ourselves.
Yeah, fair enough.
So after she hears this, she's really starting to feel like she needs to piece the fuck out of the convent, right? She's like finally getting to this point where she is ready to make some sort of move instead of just going along.
She's like, those pins were the last straw. I don't know why, but
but that was it. So she's kind of like looking for our kooky nun who we love, Jane Ray, to talk with her about all of this. And she goes into this room and like swings open the door, and there she sees Jane Ray hanging upside down from the ceiling with her hands tied and a gag in her mouth, and all the blood is like rushed to her face and it's all swollen, right? And that's just like a scene we see, and then she does not say like she's dead or not. Like I have no idea. I cannot figure out if some sources are like, then Jane Ray died, and other sources just are like, she saw Jane Ray hanging from the ceiling. So whatever, it's still just like a very, frightening again, very, wax museum, chamber of horrors again. Yeah.
Man, cut down your friend, Maria Monk.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But again, she is just this sort of like nothing. She's just kind of this character that doesn't sometimes she'll be like, I was horrified or sad or like, I didn't like that, but she just doesn't ever take any action.
And that is kind of like in keeping with the, the kind of late 18th century female novel protagonist, where you're just sort of like a novice who goes around having sexy adventures that you're not fully aware of, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. So whether she's dead or not, that's the end of Jane Ray in this book.
Oh, man.
And we don't hear from her again, but we do say thank you because she was the best part of this book by far. So now is a great time, I think, for Maria to discover that she is pregnant, wouldn't you say?
Oh, man.
Yep.
And she had that fuzzy navel.
That's what happens. So she finds out that she's pregnant, and obviously we can gather that this is from one of the priests that has been assaulting her. So at that point, she realizes, like, if I don't get out of here right now, they're going to eventually take my baby and throw my baby in the lime pit, right?
Yeah, just like Clan of the Cave Bears.
So she then is like ready to escape. And, I have to say, boring escape. Wasn't really hard. She just was like, I've got to escape. And then she's just like, and I ran out a couple of doors and like ran through the garden and jumped over a fence.
The author is just like, I'm not interested in this part. I don't care.
Yeah, it was like, whatever.
Not enough gags in this part of the book.
Exactly. No one cares. It's like my biggest critique of The Wizard of Oz is always like, too much time trying to get into the witch's friggin' castle. Takes so long for them to get into that castle, and you could have cut it down by like 30 minutes, but that's neither here nor there.
But then there just wouldn't be very much movie,
Well, maybe they could have done something else in the movie.
What would you like them to have done? They could meet those China people. I mean, like people made out of porcelain, like they did in the book on the way home.
Okay, I was going to say, I don't think they should put that in the movie. Whatever you're referencing from the old book.
They're little porcelain people, and they are worried about falling down. I honestly have no idea how you would depict that.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds better than trying to get into the castle for 45 minutes. But anyway, I just have a big problem with that.
Okay, fair enough. Well, it's like The Lord of the Rings, how you have a big walking trip for a large portion of your story.
Well, Sarah, that I don't watch Lord of the Rings.
Yes, that's right. You're right. I know.
You know that I'm no kingdoms, no dragons.
That's right. Yeah.
Anyway. Sorry, everyone. It's my worst quality.
No guys running around in leather.
Nope. So then, she's out. She's out of the convent. She runs. And finally, she ends up in a hospital.
It's just like in Flowers in the Attic when they're like, and then we did it.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I want to watch the Lifetime movie version with Heather Graham. I really want to watch that again. It's so good.
Nice.
Much better than The Wizard of Oz. Oh, man, I'm going to get in trouble.
I appreciate it. It takes a brave person to venture forth an original opinion.
Yeah, I know. I'm nothing if not brave. So she's running. She finds herself in a hospital, wakes up. She's
convenient.
Really pregnant at this point somehow. I don't know how long she's in the hospital. Time really doesn't work.
She's been sucking the sap out of maple trees.
What does that mean?
Well, I guess that she's in Canada.
Is that a saying?
No, it's not. It's not a saying. It could be a saying.
Sounds like a saying.
Because, you know, I imagine her like running through the forest for some significant portion of her pregnancy, just like living off maple sap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. That's eating like rodents, like the Donner Party.
Yeah.
Just snatching them off the snow. Yeah.
She's accompanied by a moose who lets her take bites out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, she does. She ends up in the hospital. She's like deeply, deeply pregnant and is on death's door. And it's very much like she's sweaty, she's clammy, she's going to die giving birth. And because of that, she seems like, you know, she needs a chaplain, right?
Oh,
she might die.
Yeah, she won't be happy about this.
So in comes the chaplain and thinking she's going to die, believing she needs to confess everything before she dies so that she can go to heaven, she tells the Protestant chaplain everything that happened at the convent.
And he's like, get me hard copy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then she is magically well again. Her baby survives.
That's what happens when you tell the truth.
Yeah, when you finally tell the truth to a Protestant, you will not die in childbirth. That's a promise. So then, right there on the spot, after this kind chaplain blesses her soul, she converts to Protestantism and leaves behind the absolute depravity of the entire Catholic order.
Oh, boy.
The end.
2 stars.
2 stars? Yeah, I think so.
Lacked variety. Not much of a story arc.
No, not really at all. But as we've mentioned, though, nonetheless, this book in 1836 was a massive success, which at that time meant selling like 20,000 copies in a week, which is kind of what that is now, too.
Exactly. But back then, there weren't that many people in America. And so it was, it's proportionally even a bigger phenomenon.
And let alone people who were literate, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's another part of this, of why it was so popular. So again, second best-selling book.
Man.
Prior to the Civil War.
Yeah.
Right after Uncle Tom's Cabin. And it would keep selling. By 1860, 300,000 copies were sold.
Good Lord.
They continue to be sold to this day as truth.
What?
If somebody wants it.
To who?
I don't know, to friggin' people who hate Catholics, because it's really like, it's not that it's always presented as truth, right? But it's so old that anyone can print it, basically.
Right.
So you have just a million versions of it.
It's in the public domain, like charade.
Exactly. Yep. Or like Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah. You don't care?
Oh, no. I do care about Winnie the Pooh. That's why I'm stressed about the public domain implications, I
see. Of course. So that's part 1 of our series.
Man,
and
I need a shower.
Yeah. So for part 2, we're going to get into who Maria Monk really was and who was actually behind making this memoir.
It's too early for it to be a crazy Mormon woman, so the field is wide open.
It's wide open. And we're also going to talk about the extreme anti-Catholic context that this book was born into, and then how the book kind of affected that already really paranoid culture. So
love it.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts about this book? The Awful Disclosures?
This was less titillating than I expected, to be honest. I thought there might be some nice sex parts, but there really wasn't a single one, was there?
No.
Gosh darn it. Oh, well.
Gosh darn it. I know.
Well, I'll save my titillation for uncovering the truth, which, as you know, is the most exciting thing there is.
Of course. And we will get there. So make sure all you runaway nuns out there join us for part 2. All right?
Yeah. I love the Runaway Nuns the most.
Thank you, Sarah, for being here.
You're welcome, Chelsea. Thank you for having me.
This was American Hysteria. Make sure you join us next week for part 2 of our series. And of course, listen to Sarah's shows You're Wrong About and You Are Good wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to help support our show, and we can use all the help we can get, and you want to get ad-free episodes and bonus content, you can head to patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. You'll get access to the other podcast that I do with our producer Miranda called Hysteria Home Companion, where we tell you stories related to the topics that we're covering or stories that we just know in our heart of hearts that you will love. That's patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. If you head to AmericanHysteria.com, you can pick up some of our merch and you can leave us a message on the Urban Legends hotline about a tale that you remember from growing up or even one that you've heard recently, and we might do an entire investigation about it. You can also follow us on Instagram at American Hysteria Podcast, and if you're feeling generous, leaving us a review on the app of your choosing really helps us out. American Hysteria's producer and editor is Miranda Zickler. Our associate producer is Riley Swedelius Smith, and I'm your host, Chelsea Weber Smith. Thanks, as always, for listening, and I hope you have a great week.